of the hour.
And here we are, and we are live on YouTube with another fun day on KTLO, keeping the learning on.
It's KTLO.
It is indeed KTLO.
The learning on.
And today, on our Fun and Frolic episode, we're going to talk about recalibrating.
Recalibrating.
We
I'm
know
recalibrating
from our
my eyesight.
We know from our GPS systems, and it says what it doesn't know what we're doing. It doesn't know where we are, and so it pauses to recalibrate. And we're going to talk about why that might not be a bad thing. Might not be a bad thing.
I do like it in the car. Our car does that. You know, when it tells you you're supposed to go one particular way, and we go, no. We're actually taking this other route because that's the way we want to go. And then it spends another 2-3 minutes, you know, telling you, please do a U-turn. Please do a U-turn.
I love that.
Please do a U-turn. And then it finally gets to the point where it says, recalculating.
Yes. Finally figures out there's something wrong in this picture and I better try to fix it.
Yeah, and the something wrong is likely you, at least according to the GPS.
But it's human nature to behave exactly the same way. It is human nature to say, no, that was my plan. I need to take a U-turn and go back to that. I need to take a U-turn and go back to that. And all of a sudden, the plan gets...
It's not always a bad thing, but it's just, you know, when I've already made a choice and I'm going that way, don't try to turn me around.
You know, that's...
Take a new reading.
There's a really interesting piece to that is like how much of our lives do we spend trying to get back to where we missed that turn? You know, it's like as opposed to chart a new course or go through, you know, some scenic byway or whatnot, is the belief is we have to go back to the original planned course.
That's one of the biggest leadership issues that and I've suffered from it. I mean, how many times the environment has told me I need to go a different way, and I keep saying, no, I have to throw more money at this because I believe that this was the right path. And that's something we do often in organizations.
So does part of that come from that human nature thing that says, now that I'm invested in this idea or this direction, I have to double down on that. Otherwise, I have to admit I was wrong.
Hey, how many legacy systems, and not just technology?
Wait, I know the answer to this one.
Yeah, how many legacy systems, not just technology, legacy processes, legacy policies, how many of those exist because we didn't pause to recalibrate?
Absolutely.
I think in a great many cases, the answer is all of them. In a lot of ways. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that's old or established needs to be thrown out. That's not what I mean at all. No. But, you know, I find when I'm working with organizations around, especially policies that drive practices or processes, I have to ask, why is this here? Why is this a requirement? Why is this an expectation in this case? And the answers are actually fascinating because you get a history lesson of the history of that organization. And usually they have the roots in something really bad happened, you know, something happened. And so we establish a policy that says never, ever, ever let that particular thing happen again. Never mind new problems or new challenges. We establish hard, fast policies so that we don't make that same mistake again.
Right. But we also have to remember that all innovation eventually goes into maintenance mode. And when it goes into maintenance mode, it goes to comfort. And when it goes to comfort, we resist our desire to move outside of comfort. We forget that it started with innovation.
Interesting.
And let me ask you something about that, Patty. If we're innovating, which means we're changing things, we're introducing new. Actually, it means we're introducing new things, right? So we're introducing new things. We're introducing new things, and we're introducing new things. Can we sustain that growth without increasing the size of our organization or the technological capabilities of our organization to manage all of that? How do we approach that?
Well, that's a question that's pretty Yeah, pretty tough to answer without actually giving an example of an organization, right? Like I mean, some can be managed with growth, some can be managed without growth. I mean, it depends on the innovation, right? Where I think we need to take consideration is when we do the, the great rim move, where we say we're going to be comfortable and celebrate and sit on and rest on our laurels.
Mm.
So we have to have a combination of continual desire to see what comes next, meet the trends, that kind of thing. So we have to have a piece of the organization that is still continuing to innovate, while at the same time we really throw the right resources to maintain what's there and move forward with it.
You have to have a solid base to jump off from. I mean, that is sort of part of, I guess it depends on your level of risk acceptance or risk aversion, which we've touched on previously as well. But that standing on the edge,
the willingness to stand on the edge.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then we're
especially when you're scared of heights.
And then we travel down that road then of what's safe and what's not safe sometimes is defined by whether we're meeting shareholder demand or whether we're right. So we don't want to travel down that rabbit hole. That'll take us way off.
Yeah. So I was thinking it's not just standing on the threshold or standing on the brink. There's an organizational reality. We say we want to take risks, we want to be innovative, we want to do things, and sometimes in some organizations, it's not all, of course, but when things bad happen because we tried something new or we explored some new area, if there's consequences, if there's rewards and punishment, if you will, then people are going to tend to not recalibrate, not,
right. We slide right into risk avoidance then.
Right, exactly. Because, well, that's, no one ever gets fired for, it used to be buying IBM. Now it's for following a framework of best practice or, parroting the words of the thought leadership of the day or whatnot. If you want to sound really smart, you quote Simon Sinek. If you want to sound really innovative, you say we should be doing DevOps, Agile, blah,
or
blah,
you can sound really wise by quoting my grandfather, who was used to breed horses and train them, and he said, only bet what you can afford to lose.
Well,
I like that.
That's a good corporate governance structure.
Or my dad, who said most people should not be allowed in public.
Also true. No.
There are, well, right now, I mean, what is it? Two GNUs?
Wow. Yeah. So my quotable quote, just like that from my dad, is don't do things just because everybody else was doing it. And of course, if everybody else was jumping off a bridge, would you? But his thought, that at least that I took away, was a lot bigger than that. If everyone is buying this, don't just buy it because everybody else is buying it. Why? Why do you want it? Give me a reason. My dad used to do that. I used to have to make business
Craig,
pitches.
You just did the grommet pointy finger.
I did not.
You did.
Where is Wilkinson when we need him?
Actually, I'm trying to get a nomination into the group, and he refuses to let me in.
No,
so
well,
fine.
This just might qualify you.
So I will pass along a piece of wildlife wisdom from the spousal unit, who is a great watcher of birds and
photographer thereof.
Brilliant photographer.
And one of the things that she taught me was she would hear the crows being very agitated, flock of crows, just squawking up a storm. Instead of looking at the crows, she would look up, because generally the reason the crows were squawking was because there was an eagle in the area. Yeah. So she heard the crows, looked for the eagle. And not many people know how to do that. Look away from where the noise is and look for what else is happening. And that's a very interesting strategy.
So
in a lot of
usually
ways.
When you look at the noise, you're going to get hit too.
So there's a meme right there. If there's not a meme that's tossed out with KTLO learn on it about, when you hear the crows, look for the eagle. I don't know what memeable is right
that.
there.
Yeah, you got that right, Greg?
Yeah, I got it. I'm right here in my notes. I'm on it.
Because I'm not taking on all the work. Okay.
Yes, you are so far.
Oh, so far I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
so let's talk about recalibration. So years and years ago, when I was an electronics technician, one of the tasks that electronic technicians would do in the company that I worked for is to go calibrate test equipment. And I thought that was fascinating with regard to our topic, because we're talking about taking the time to pause to recalibrate. And one of the things that may or may not apply broadly to our topic is if your equipment is giving you false information, if it says an inch is actually an inch and a half or vice versa, then you're getting bad information and you can't rely
It's
on
going
your
to be a
equipment.
very interesting navigation.
Exactly, right? So part of the idea of recalibration is returning your instruments to an accurate assessment of where you're at. That it starts with that. Then I think the other piece of the recalibration is exactly what you see here, which is adjusting the plan as you go. So when your equipment is calibrated, now we can rely on our navigation tools to say, okay, I don't think this is working out the way we want. I don't think
And
this
what
is where I
happens
want to
though?
be.
Much like a, oh, sorry.
So what happens when magnetic north shifts?
Right. Yeah. Not everybody knows that reference.
That's much like a flight plan, right? You adjust accordingly. So if you consider recalibration, you have a flight plan, but there are things that get in the way, right? You're going to have weather that comes up. You're going to have some wind issues. You might not be able to land on the same runway. You have to adjust as you go.
Exactly. And that applies to, and people would say, well, it doesn't matter, I'm just sitting at home right now. Yes, well, okay, think about where you are right now, working from home or whatever.
Yeah.
What are your wind issues? What are your weather issues? What are those things that are going to interfere? Like I get a pop-up message and it says, you're running out of space on your hard drive. Oh crap, again? But then what happens is you can't just continue what you're doing because what you're doing is heavy labor work on it or whatever. So you actually do have to pause.
Yeah.
And you have to work with what you've got and understand what's going on around you in order to move forward again.
So I think that there's a lot of voices talking right now during the pandemic and the quarantine and all that, which sooner or later somebody will hear me say that and it'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was so last year, right? But I think it gives us a ready metaphor for a lot of the things that we've been talking about, because most of this broadcast that we've been doing, the KTLO Learn, is not about how do you survive during a lockdown, during a pandemic. This is about how you chart your course in this world. And when we're forced to work from home, we're forced to kind of take a pause, if you will, then it becomes a broader theme for, am I doing what I should be doing? Am I behaving in a way that I choose to behave in the circumstances that I'm in? Or am I becoming, or I'm adhering to who I aspire to be when I get there, or as I go towards where I'm going to go? And so this becomes more of a, how do I think and how do I adjust, more than just how do I survive this current crisis and land income when we're done here.
Well, I do like Ella Wheeler Wilcox is saying here, 'tis the set of the sails and not the gales, which tells us the way to go. But for me too, there's also another saying around that, is that, you can't control the direction of the wind, but you can adjust the sails.
Yeah.
And I think the two of them, it's how we set the sails, it's not the gales. But what is our externals that we can't control, but we still need to understand? I think that's a really interesting thing, is that, are we going to go with the flow? It's, in Australia, even like when we're swimming, we always say, go with the rip, because if you try to fight against the rip in the tide when you're swimming, it's not, you're going to drown. Go with the rip. And then once you get clear, then you're able to, So I think there's this understanding of what those externals are and understanding what is within our power.
You still have to understand the weather in order to set your sails.
Yeah, right? And you have to, and you also have to understand too, because you have to understand what you have at hand with you, because what kind of sails, what kind of sailboat, what kind of engine, and all of that is like what kind of our energy levels, where's our emotions at, where's our head at, what support do we have around us in order to do that.
Well,
So we do have the power to set a new course, as Greg said when we were discussing this earlier.
yeah.
And so I think that the question that comes after that is, what do we need? What gives us that power? Where does that power come from? And what do we need to set that new course? And that's, we're trying to think through why we might want to set a new course, but what are some of the requirements, if you will?
I think you really have to come to terms with like who and what you are. What are my skills? What are my strengths? What are my passions? Who do I aspire to be? And then from there, I think there needs to be a certain amount of, and what do I want to accomplish in this world? What do I want to do? Because those are guiding principles that I think you kind of have to nail down before you decide where you're going to go do activities to become that or to achieve that. And I think we spend so much of our time focusing on tasks, focusing on what I would consider a lot of noise around topics. Over the years, being in corporate life, Fortune 10 company that I was in, we were very busy. We were intently busy. And it was like running on a treadmill, except that they just keep turning the speed up and turning the speed up and turning the speed up. And so, as a global corporation, we were on calls morning, noon, night, all the time. And we in a lot of ways, our culture is geared around the always on, always connected, always achieving, always doing. There's always another email. There's always another Slack.
Greg, I'm getting exhausted.
I know.
And during the work from home, we're online now. And
Yeah.
so if you think about the difference between being in the office and doing your work and going to a conference, we are now on conference energy because every single meeting is an event. Everything's an event. We're constantly having one thing right after the other. Thank you.
And
thanks, Roy. We need time to switch gears between the tasks.
So Patty, what's your think? Because like this whole busy, and Greg, when I was saying, oh my God, I'm exhausted. And the reason for that is because busy is a falsehood.
Right.
We're not, and efficient are different than busy.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes if you need to be an effective leader, which actually you need to be an effective leader, then you need to give yourself a time out.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about a timeout because you've been naughty and stand in the corner.
Which you deserve.
I mean a real timeout.
Which you should.
I am quite familiar with that, by the way. Yes. I'm just saying.
So we're jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And then once we get all of our Zoom calls done, lately in this work from home model, we haven't designed the model around what work from home really looks like. And the inability to really value those pieces of, I'm walking from my car to the office and that's my pause. I'm going down 3 flights of stairs in order to get to that next meeting. And I have 5 minutes, 10 minutes and building in those pauses, those switching gears and in between, not just tasks, but meetings and opportunities within the organization. Like, we talk about the constant, these new engagement wellness programs, let's get everybody in, into another Zoom call. Let's get them all. And when you do your work might be well after your business day is over with, if your organization insists you follow a business day. And there is no pause. No. And yet both people and organizations right now have the best opportunity to create that pause or use this as a pause to have the opportunity to do their own recalibration. And we don't want to do it. We want to be bold. We don't want to go back to what was before, because what was before had a lot of breaks in it. There were a lot of fissures in those plans and that movement. We need to really take the pause so that we have time to think. Why would we want to return to something that might be mediocre when we could create something really great, both for ourselves personally, but as an organization as well?
I think this is where it's not just taking the pause to recalibrate, but as part of that calibration, because minute by minute, my position can change. So I need to be able to assess what I have with me, around me, who is with me. Those are the things that I can incorporate into my ability to recalibrate to a new position. And so learning those skills, understanding those things and learning the skills to do that is part of whether I are able to take the time out and focus on some of the heavier, deeper stuff I need to do to recalibrate versus those things where I need to recalibrate and, as the saying goes, turn on a dime.
Mm. And on that note, I like to bring things in from other realms other than the mental space and the development space that we're talking about, mainly creating empty space, as you said, Simone, not just in our calendar, but if you think about it, there's part of the art of design that tells you white space is at least as important as the design itself, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Gotta
Absolutely.
have the white space around it. It's same is true in music. You have to leave space between the notes so that the notes make sense.
Yeah.
And the same, and the other thing that I was thinking is that, and you said turn on a dime, and I was thinking, as one who used to drive cars fast, and Greg, go-karts, right? You know that if momentum is a fun thing, you're going really fast in a direction and then you need to change direction, it is extremely difficult to do. You're going to get pushed sideways, or you might not be able to brake in time, and boom, you're off the track. And so the speed at which you go certainly affects the time you have to think about pausing in between.
And this is where I'd like to really ensure that people are looking at, while they're recalibrating, while they're looking at what are the skills that I need to help me do this, is increasing your cognitive flexibility, because that gives us the variety. It reduces the stress. So when all our best laid plans go astray, having cognitive flexibility or thinking skills, critical thinking skills, different ways of perceiving and thinking, then that gives us viable alternatives. It means that we're able to consider the context that we're in before we actually act.
It's like the difference between a really great piece of art that has well utilized the white space to a Where's Waldo picture where you can't find anything because there's so much clutter and so much involved that you get
can
lost.
I call out Phil Green here just for the moment when you said that? Phil, he is a fabulous guy in our field, but he's been doing these personal posts of his pet beagle out on his forest walks. And you have to pick out where you can find
the beagle. Yes.
Find the beagle.
They're terrific.
And he lists whether it's an easy, medium, or hard one. And I have to say, it is really exactly like that. You've got to, where is this? And what you're looking at is not what you expect to see. And when you see the result.
So white space brings me to one of the things that I've looked at over the years. You remember when you were a kid, or at least maybe it was just me, right? So I'd spend hours walking in the woods, looking at the sky, just pondering and thinking, and had big ideas. And there's research now that supports the idea that boredom, just unstructured, random thinking, actually contributes to, or is highly connected with creativity. And I think it's not too far of a stretch to suggest that when we deprive ourselves of the ability for this free thinking, of the running the risk of boredom, which is kind of the bane of modern society, you must be busy at all times, is we have become less and less creative as individuals and as organizations. And we say, good enough is good enough. Go with the program from yesterday. Go with what we're doing. And we lose that ability to be flexible, because if you're creative, if you have that creative bent, you can say, well, this happened, so I don't know, let's try this. Let's do this. And
that's
I've
exactly what happens in artwork.
Yeah. And I've tried really hard to recover some of that time for myself personally, to let my mind wander. But I would just, this is fascinating. If you ever get back to a grocery store, when you're waiting in line, what is everybody doing? They're not looking around, watching people, or thinking big thoughts. They're doing this. Everybody's always busy. And if your brain for a moment pauses and says, I don't have anything to do or think about, we stifle that. We stuff it with noise. We obscure it. And I think that's one of my pause to recalibrate, is allow your mind to wander, allow yourself unstructured time. And I think rather than saying, what am I going to do? That I need to ponder that, ponder nothing, ponder whatever.
What would
It's
happen,
reaching
Greg, if you
because-
put a blank piece of paper in front of you and a pen?
Yeah.
No noise. You're not allowed to put any of your music on. No, nothing on the TV, nothing on your laptop. Everything is, it's just blank piece of paper and a pen.
I'd be looking at the window and thinking about what would happen if I jumped through it. But other than that, that's one of the reasons I very rarely, aside from the space considerations, which are ridiculous, on planes, I'm always amazed that they'll work like crazy in the gate area. They get on the plane, and then the first thing that happens when they sit down is that laptop comes out, and they're back to work again. And work.
Mm-hmm.
Put the laptop away, take off. As soon as you hit 10,000 feet, they're back on the laptop again. And I think, wow, man, what I use the airplane rides for, in my case, is I carry this, which is my Kindle, and I have books upon books in here, and I will use that time for reading of some type. And the other thing that I do is I take some notes, do a little social media probably, but also take notes of what I'm thinking about and read.
I still carry a paperback book.
Yeah.
I still do it. I
have a little notepad that I carry in my bag with me, and I pull it out and I doodle. Honestly, the doodling is where I think best. I listen to myself better when I'm doodling. I actually take that pause, right?
I think it's really interesting because, and thanks for putting this up here, Roy, when I think about the recalibration of culture, because I put up something on Instagram today that I found quite powerful, and I was having a really good thing. I was going through my photographs. See, I was actually taking a pause. I thought I'll just go through some of my photographs. And because obviously I'm not traveling, haven't done so for a while, and won't be doing for some time yet. And so looking at some of my visits, and I came across one which I really loved on my New York skyline, my photographs that I took. And I was thinking about this whole cultural aspect, and what was is no longer, and what currently is going to pass on. And what that led me to was this: changes in a skyline reflect the changes in its society. But at the heart of that, it's the changes in our society that reflect the changes within its people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look around me, when we take that pause and we think about how we're going to recalibrate what happens, our world has changed, our skylines have changed, the way we live our life has changed, the way we drive, walking in with a mask on to a shop, or any of those things. And look, what is now will pass on as well. And I think I'd like to leave people with that sense of hope, that sense of, it's okay, this will shift. But your culture is going to shift. It will recalibrate. But that means it doesn't come back to where it was. It'll come back to a new stasis.
And that's why I think that there's just, and I've said this before too, one of the things I think about right now, our situation right now, is that it's packed with opportunity to do this recalibration, to rethink how we do things, to make those decisions that some of the big corporations are making, and saying, you know what, this is working out pretty well. We don't need those people to come back to the office. That's a huge decision that they're making. But now is the time. And Patty, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to ask a few questions that are related to culture, because what's happening right now, anyone who tells you we know what this is going to look like has no idea. Humans, when they go through things like this, we are going to be entering into a new space of people having suffered trauma, people having been uncomfortable, people seeing new ways and inventing new ways, people who have jumped on things they've never done before, but here they are, they've been successful in it, even though they've been pushing back. We are going to see a huge shift in mindset, attitude, ability. And I think that if we are willing to be open as organizations and as individuals to the recalibration that's going to happen anyway because of changed mindsets and attitudes and things, people will not be coming back as the same people they left. And you are not returning as the same person you were 3 months ago. There has been an entire environmental shift that is going to have you have new fears, new hopes, see new opportunities, reach out in new ways. And so recalibration is going to happen with or without you. You have the opportunity now to be intentional about that. As an organization, you have that opportunity to be intentional, and as individuals as well. And I think that that whole idea of being bold, not being willing to step back into mediocrity, because that is not going to serve the new mindsets that are evolving.
You know, what you're saying is just so spot on about recalibration is also about reinventing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen various artists and actors, and we've seen other people, even within our own sphere, people who have reinvented themselves time and time again because they are adjusting the sails.
Yeah.
And they are sailing into new territory. They are becoming something new. Or I don't know if it's about becoming something new. I think it's about adding to what you already are.
Yeah,
but it's like an expansion almost.
It was interesting, and I can't believe I'm going to name Vanilla Ice in a broadcast, but Fancy Mills interviewed him at HDI, whichever it was, and she said something as if it was a foregone conclusion that I would have said as well, which is, wow, so you've reinvented yourself, because he was an 80s rapper or whatever.
Yep.
And all these things, he's an entrepreneur, all those kind of things. And he said, I never reinvented myself. I just became new. I just kept growing and exploring. I forget his exact words, but it was fascinating. He emphatically denied that he
Weren't we in the same room in that interview?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we were all four of us were in that same room, weren't we?
Were in the same room.
Yeah. And you know, and I must admit, it was pretty amazing, because his, you know, people have, I'm not a huge fan of the music from back then that he had, but when listening to him just talk about how he saw his life and how he switched and made changes, we should do not be ashamed of your failures along the way either. And that was one of the other things that he talked about.
Because they're lessons. They actually are what push you to do that growth.
Exactly.
Become more of who you are. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was just going to say, I think our society, our discussion of politics, our concerns about things like pandemics, it's in a way, it makes us feel for people that bad things are going to happen, that I won't be able to cope, I can't do it. And I think in a very real way, it takes away our confidence or our ability to say, no, we've been through things before. I can adapt, I can improvise, I can overcome, I can figure it out, and I can become not just a survivor, but a thriver in this world going forward. And I think there's so many forces around us that we kind of need to tune that noise out and start looking for the eagles that are flying. Like, we're focused on all this noise, and we need to be going, wow, I want to be like that. I want to soar. I want to fly. I want to try new things, and I want to be fearless. And that means I have to own my failures and my shortcomings and my own personal growth. To be bold, you have to risk failure. You have to risk that people are going to say, what is he doing? Who is he? Why is he? And you have to kind of put that behind you and look ahead at what's ahead. That's exciting to me. That's why I'm part of this conversation.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm ever going to be fearless. I think what I want is the faith and the trust in my abilities to be confident enough to to make that jump. Look, I'm thinking about standing on the edge and I'm already still just, yeah. But, you know, it's having that, you still have the fear, but building the confidence and the courage to jump anyway.
So
And
Patty,
we have a lot
it
of
off.
ownership over that, right? We
Yeah.
have a lot of ownership over our attitude and how we approach that. A lot of us will look outside of ourselves and say, oh my gosh, I am so stuck. I feel like I'm completely out of control. And that's not the truth. You know, and I think asking that question are my truths truly true? But we have to it's true.
it is
are
very
my
true.
truths, the things that I'm believing in, are they really true? And we
Right.
have to challenge that on a continual basis individually. And I think that when we're stuck, we tend to make the assumption that others can see what we see, but they're doing nothing about it. And it's frustrating. And so we have to remember that other people may not be able to see what we can see. They can't see the gaps of the opportunity. So our job is not to control what they see, but our job is really to see what in that can I do and still be bold,
Right.
and stop believing that because they can't see what we see, we're actually stuck.
And that made me think of this, Patty, when we were talking about this earlier, the curse of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And I think that our fellow travelers in the world of information technology are often guilty of the curse of knowledge. When we talk about knowledge management, for example, one of the big mistakes that often gets made is that we put things in the language of us and not the language of the people we serve. We expect them to know what a server is and what exchange might be, as opposed to email and calendar. We don't see things from their perspective because we know this stuff so internally, so it's just part of the way we think, and we forget that other people may not know the same things that we know. We assume that they know the same things, and so I love the name of it. It's the curse of knowledge. And it is a curse. It gets in our way. It gets in the way of our ability to communicate.
When I facilitate within organizations and they are having a hard time understanding the curse, I might stop everything and say, hold on for a second, let's do an exercise. And I'll give a common song title to one person and tell them, and not show it to their partner, but tell them to tap it with a pen so they can hear the tune in their head and they're tapping, and the other person is supposed to try and figure out what the song is. And all they can hear is the tapping, and they've got to try and make up the tune on their own. And that's in organizations, that's happening on a continual basis, right? One person has the knowledge of what that sounds like, and they can hear it and they can sing it while they're tapping it. The other person is only hearing a pen hitting a table, right? And
that's awesome.
That is awesome.
That is a great exercise. And I'm thinking of, here's where my brain goes. I was thinking of somebody put up a website where you could select a particular element of the website and it would play sound. And the sound was Formula One race cars. And it was just the sound of the Formula One race car. And the idea was that you had to tell what track it was just from the sound. And it was awesome. And I was pretty good at it because I know the courses very well. But that's a fascinating exercise to get out and try to figure that out just from some element of that you're not used to looking at. That's what I really like. That.
Right. So we've been at all the meetings. We've been able to facilitate the conversations, all of this. And then we bring someone new into the group, somebody who actually has to instrumentally produce the action to make this fly. And they haven't been a part of all that. And then we're angry because they aren't aware of the importance and value behind it, right? Yeah.
And all of this discussion made me think of this. I love the scenes in the Pink Panther when the poor police chief, who's Clouseau's boss,
do the voice, please do the voice.
Winds up, I'm bit of curse. Does your dog bet?
On my dog.
e- every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. His boss winds up in a psychiatric hospital because he can't deal with Clouseau anymore. And Emile Coué was a famous French psychiatrist who this was his mantra. He would have people convince themselves that every day in every way they were getting better and better. And so we can do that, but in order to do that, we have to assess where we are and set ourselves and make choices about the direction we're going to move in, right?
So,
We do indeed.
so
We
one of the
do indeed.
things, oh, I love that. I wanted to add that, when we talked about being in the circumstances and we talked about the noise and I've really come to value the idea that, I can't change other people. I can't always change circumstances. I can influence. But one thing that I can do is turn the spotlight around on me and ask myself, how can I change me? How can I change how I act, how I behave, what choices I make, how I choose to feel about things? That's something that's always in my control is the me. And so the real growth opportunity when you feel stuck, you can re-perceive how you're stuck. Like, what can I do? Like, I'm not the victim of this circumstance. I'm not the victim of these people and these whatever it is that is frustrating me that I can't get them to see. Rather than try to focus my energy on changing them, focus my energy on what can I do differently. It isn't always that I can, but that's a much healthier conversation, in my opinion.
And when you were listening when you were talking about those questions, I started hearing the Tina Weymouth bass line from the Talking Heads. Ka-doom, doom, doom. Ka-doom, doom, doom. This is not my beautiful house.
You may ask yourself.
Same as it ever was.
Wow, just don't start Winchester Cathedral on me.
No. We won't go there. Talking Heads better.
Yeah.
Slow down, you're going too fast.
Best do.
Well, actually,
Just to throw another one in.
Is that our pocket of happiness? Is that what it is?
It is our pocket of happiness. And speaking of pockets of
Patty
happiness,
is our pocket of happiness.
look
Yes.
how he segues into
That
this
is
like the commercial meister here. Speaking of pockets of happiness, there's our website, KTLOlearn.com. And it's there. We have some posts up there about these conversations that we have on Fridays. Patty has just written a really brilliant take on some of the things that we're talking about today. And also there's an infographic, a poster, a graphic, if you will, about recalibration that you can grab and you ask questions of yourself. This is not my beauty. Oh, sorry. You can ask those questions.
So speaking of asking questions,
Yes.
so just to sort of wrapping up here. So Patty, what's your little pocket of happiness this week?
What's my pocket of happiness this week? I've been doing something over the last number of weeks that's pretty fun. I am doing an hour of school with my 5-year-old grandson every day. And that absolutely is my pocket of happiness. He and I get some really good laughs in that, and it's all very creative and fun.
And Master Roy, for you?
My pocket of happiness is that we have roasted chicken and baked potatoes for dinner. This is how I think. And that's going to be a nice, just have some fresh food in the house, and it's going to be a lovely thing. I'm going to enjoy that and a little extra time off, although it's Zoom meeting history. That's what else is new. Yeah. But yeah, that's my pocket of happiness, is where I live and what we do together.
Yeah, Gregory.
Yeah, I knew you were going to come to me. So I have a couple of projects that are in the hopper that I can't yet talk about publicly, but I kind of have stopped this week and taken inventory of all the things that are frustrating or challenging or difficult. I was like, look at the opportunity that you're sitting on here, the golden opportunity that is unprecedented. And for any normal person, that would be the opportunity of a lifetime. And I'm choosing to look at that and celebrate that and go at it with great gusto. That's my pocket of happiness.
How about
you,
Simone?
Yeah, I've certainly been recalibrating this week. Given that was our topic, I thought, okay, I better take stock and let's practice some of these things that we were going to talk about, which I've done. upgraded a few of my social things and started really thinking about what it is that I value most. And yes, we've got slightly lifted lockdown. So for the first time in a very long time, I've made an Australian pavlova. So we're going to have that this evening for dessert, which is just, it's just a joy. It's not the pavlova itself. I guess it's part of, a little bit of home here. But I think, I'll close it off by just saying, I think what's starting to happen is that the joy really shows when you're becoming your purpose.
There you go.
I think organizationally or personally, if we're ever going to get to managed growth to where we want to go, we have to do some discovery on the pickup things we just add to our lives without intention. And then we need to really get into how do I strategically become who I really want to be?
And I would add to that, lose the fear that changing from what you've been doing and may have been successful in the past, if you change away from that, that's a failure. Lose that. Adaptive growing people always adjust to new realities and leave things behind. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean they're not afraid. It just means they keep going anyway.
Yep.
Well said.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on KTLO, Keeping the Learning On. And we'll see you next time.
On.